The forest was black except for the light. It swayed between the trees, a dim amber lantern rocking as if someone carried it, though no figure could be seen. The road was narrow, slick with rain, branches curling overhead like ribs closing in on a body. David slowed his car, leaning forward, squinting through the mist-spattered windshield. The lantern was too far from the roadside to belong to a hiker, too steady to be windblown, and too deliberate in its swing. Left, right, left, right. His wipers scraped across the glass. A low fog crawled along the ground, swallowing his headlights, and still the lantern burned. He thought, maybe someone's lost. He thought, maybe it's a trap. But most of all, he thought, why can I see it from every angle? Even as the road curved, the lantern remained, pinned between the pines like a star nailed to the earth. David's knuckles tightened on the wheel. The forest pressed closer. Rain hissed, and then, bang! The sound cracked like a gunshot against the hood of his car. He slammed the brakes, heart punching his ribs. Someone had landed in the road. A shadow darted across the headlights, long hair streaming, bare feet slapping asphalt. It vanished into the trees, swallowed by the dark. And when David looked again, the lantern was gone. Only silence, only rain. Then came the knock. 3 taps, hollow, on the driver's side window. David froze, his breath clouding the glass. He turned his head slowly, every nerve shrieking not to. The window was empty. Just raindrops crawling like slow insects streaking downward. No face pressed against the glass. No hand, but the taps had been real. He whispered to himself. It was just a branch. Just a branch. Branches don't knock 3 times. His pulse refused to slow. He drove again, faster this time, eyes scanning the roadside. The forest felt alive, watching, leaning, listening. Every shadow seemed to twitch. Every gust of wind carried something almost like a whisper. Then the road ended. He hadn't expected it, just a dead stop where asphalt gave way to mud. The GPS on his phone flickered, then died. No signal. Great, he muttered. His voice sounded small. Through the rain and mist, he saw it. A cabin set back from the road. Dark wood, sagging roof. A porch that leaned like a broken jaw. For a moment, he considered turning around. But the forest behind him looked hungrier than the cabin. He parked, pulled his jacket tight, and stepped out. The air reeked of wet soil and something faintly metallic. The rain softened to drizzle, but the silence pressed harder. The cabin's door creaked as though breathing. Inside, the air was thick with dust. Cobwebs stretched like veins across the corners. Old furniture slumped under white sheets. The smell of smoke lingered, though no fire had burned in years. He should have left. He knew that. But his body moved forward, boots tapping hollow on wooden floorboards. On a small table lay a journal, leather cracked, pages swollen from damp. His hand hovered before flipping it open. The first line made his throat dry. To see the lantern is to be chosen. David shut the journal. He stared at the cover as if it might burn him. Chosen for what? He whispered. The silence offered nothing back. That's when he heard it. Knock, knock, knock. Not on the door. From inside the walls, he spun, scanning the dim interior. The lantern wasn't here. The cabin was dark except for faint gray light leaking through cracked shutters. Still, he knew what he'd heard, and then he saw it. Through a narrow window, the lantern swaying just beyond the porch. No hand held it. No chain or hook. It hung in the mist, swinging as though someone invisible stood there, waiting. His voice cracked. Who's out there? The lantern brightened. From the journal, a page turned on its own. He heard the dry whisper of paper shifting. He forced himself to look. The words crawled across the page in smeared ink. You should not have looked. His breath shook. He stepped back. The floor groaned beneath him, boards bowing as if under weight. The air grew heavier, colder. A voice hissed from the corner. A whisper so faint it almost blended with the creak of wood. David, he whipped around. Who's there? No one. Just the sheets draped over furniture, shapes too close to human. The whisper again, closer. You saw it. His chest tightened. What do you want? Silence, then laughter. A child's laugh, muffled, bouncing through the walls. David stumbled back toward the door. but when he reached for the handle, his hand stopped. It wasn't there. The wood where the door had been was now smooth, seamless, as though the entrance had never existed. His voice cracked. No, no, no. The journal snapped shut with a thunderous clap. The lantern was inside, not hanging, not carried, just floating in the middle of the room, light swelling until the walls shivered in its glow. The sheets over the furniture pulsed like lungs. Shadows danced across the cabin, all bending toward him. David backed against the wall, throat raw. Stay away. A whisper bled through the air. You shouldn't have looked. The lantern swung faster, shadows slashing across the walls. His heartbeat thundered, but beneath it he heard something worse. Footsteps. Not one set, many, pacing in the attic, shuffling under the floorboards, crawling inside the walls. The lantern flared. The room rippled, the walls stretching outward like melted wax. The furniture leaned closer, twisted into shapes that resembled kneeling figures. David clamped his hands over his ears. Stop it! The voices didn't stop. They grew louder, overlapping, cries, whispers, fragments of prayers. A chorus of those who had looked before. Then the journal opened again. Pages flapping like frantic wings until they stopped on a final empty sheet. A sentence bled into existence. Every light must take another, David gasped. No! The lantern surged forward. Blinding light devoured the cabin, searing his vision white. His scream split the silence. And then, nothing. The cabin stood empty. Weeks later, hikers found it while cutting through the woods. The place smelled of damp ash. The furniture lay draped in dust-heavy sheets. The door groaned when touched, but no one entered. On the table sat a journal, open to the last page. Words were scrawled in jagged handwriting. To see the lantern is to be chosen. He looked. Now he swings the light. The hikers backed away. One swore the lantern hanging in the corner flickered brighter, though no flame burned. Outside, fog pressed against the trees. Between the trunks, a faint amber glow rocked back and forth. Left, right, waiting. The forest swallowed their laughter. 4 friends, Mia, Jordan, Kyle, and Hannah, pushed through wet ferns and brittle branches, flashlights bouncing in the dark. They were lost, or close enough to it, but the mood still clung to jokes. Scary movie setup. Kyle grinned. Cabin in the woods. No cell service. We're basically screwed. Yeah, Hannah said, her breath sharp with nerves. Except this isn't a movie. Ahead, Mia stopped. Her beam landed on a cabin, weathered and silent, crouched in the clearing like it had been waiting. The walls sagged, windows hollowed black. The porch looked soft with rot. Perfect, Jordan muttered. It's either shelter or a serial killer's vacation home. They approached slowly. The door hung crooked, its hinges whining. The cabin was cold inside, dust drifting in slivers of moonlight. A table sat in the center, 4 chairs around it like an invitation. Kyle smirked. He cupped his hands around his mouth and called into the cabin. Hello? The air held its breath, then came the reply. Hello, same word, same pitch, same voice, not from Kyle's throat, but from the dark corner of the cabin. The group froze. Their smiles cracked into silence. Jordan whispered, That wasn't funny. But no one was laughing. They stood in the doorway, the weight of the echo sinking into their bones. Kyle forced a laugh, too loud, too sharp. Okay, maybe it's the acoustics, like an echo or something, but echoes don't sound identical, and they don't come from a different corner than where you're standing. Let's just stay for the night, Mia said, voice tight. We're soaked, we're lost, and the cabin interrupted her. Let's just stay for the night, it repeated, her words tumbling from the shadows, syllable for syllable. Tone exact. Hannah backed toward the door. Nope, I'm not. The mimicry was perfect. Too perfect. The group huddled, their flashlights twitching across warped walls. Nothing moved. No hidden speakers, no animals. Only that table and 4 chairs. The silence stretched, oppressive. Finally, Jordan whispered, We'll leave at first light. Just don't talk. Don't give it anything to copy. But silence inside the cabin felt worse. Hours bled together. Rain hammered the roof. The group sat at the table, flashlights dimming, each avoiding eye contact. The cabin creaked like an old throat clearing itself, and then it began again. Mia's stomach growled from hunger. The sound was faint, but the cabin made it louder, grotesque, stretching it into a low rumble that shook the chairs. Kyle hissed, Stop listening to us. Stop listening to us," the cabin said back. Crueler this time, as if mocking. They covered their ears. But it wasn't sound they could block. The words arrived inside their skulls, exact replicas of their thoughts. Hannah broke first. "Please," she begged. "We don't want trouble." The cabin whispered her plea back, softer, like a secret lover's whisper. "Please." "We don't want trouble." Mia slammed her fists on the table. "What do you want?" For once, the cabin didn't repeat. Instead, it answered, "One of you." The table rattled. Dust fell from the ceiling. The air thickened. Kyle's voice cracked. "What the hell does that mean?" No answer. Just the faint echo of laughter, their own laughter, replayed in distorted layers, each chuckle twisting into something inhuman. That was when Mia noticed. There were 5 chairs around the table now. The 5th chair was occupied, not by a stranger, but by someone who looked exactly like Hannah. Same hair, same jacket, same trembling hands. The real Hannah whimpered, "That's not me. That's not me." The copy tilted its head, a smile peeling too wide across its face. It whispered in her voice, "That's not me." Jordan shot to his feet. "We're leaving, now." The cabin disagreed. The door slammed shut, hinges screeching. The windows bled darkness thicker than night, pressing against the glass. The copy stood, chair scraping across the floor. It stepped closer to Hannah, each movement stuttering, like a puppet yanked by invisible strings. "Stay away," Hannah sobbed. The copy repeated, "Stay away," but its grin widened. The others pulled Hannah back as the air thickened with whispers, all 4 of their voices speaking at once, overlapping, taunting. Their own sentences twisted back at them, threats, pleas, confessions they never made aloud. Then Kyle screamed, a sound of sheer terror, not pain. The copy had touched his shoulder. His body jerked as though yanked backward, but there was no hand. Only the echo of his own scream, repeated and repeated until it drowned the real one. And when the noise stopped, Kyle's seat was empty. The cabin whispered in his voice, "Thank you." By dawn, the storm had passed. The cabin door swung open as if it had never been locked. The surviving 3 stumbled into the pale morning light, faces pale, clothes clinging damp to their skin. No one spoke. Behind them, the cabin breathed with silence. Inside, 4 chairs sat neatly around the table. 4, not 5. Kyle's was gone. As they staggered back toward the tree line, Hannah dared one glance over her shoulder. Her blood iced. The cabin was laughing, not loudly, not cruelly, but with a perfect familiar sound. Kyle's laugh, bright and easy, rolling through the windows as though he were still inside. And beneath it, like an echo stitched into the walls, came another laugh. Hers. The key was already on the table. When Claire unlocked the rented cabin, the place smelled of pine and rain-soaked wood. She dragged her suitcase across the threshold, shivering at the silence that swallowed her. It was supposed to be peaceful, a weekend away, far from her office, far from the city noise. But she froze when her eyes landed on the guestbook. It sat open on the desk by the window, leather cracked, pen laid neatly beside it. At the top of the page, written in neat black ink, was her name, Claire Hammond. Her pulse jumped. The handwriting was hers, exact, even down to the crooked loop in her H. The date beneath it read 2 weeks ago. She whispered to herself, "That can't be mine." Her voice sounded too loud. The cabin seemed to lean in, listening. Claire ran her fingers across the entry. It wasn't possible. She hadn't been here before. She'd booked the cabin online just last week. Yet the strokes of the pen were hers, the tilt of her letters, the pressure of the ink blotches where she'd always hesitated. She flipped back through the guest book. Pages of names, dates, brief notes. Lovely stay. Peaceful. Would visit again. Some had crossed out lines, ink smudged as if written in panic. Others ended mid-sentence. She shut the book, trying to still the pounding in her chest. Coincidence, just a coincidence. But the cabin unsettled her from the start. The furniture was arranged exactly as she would have chosen. The kettle already filled. The bed turned down, pillows stacked the way she always stacked them. A scarf, the same color as hers, draped across the arm of a chair. Her throat tightened. Nope, not thinking about it. Just here to relax. She made tea, sat at the desk, tried to read, but her eyes kept sliding back to the guest book, the page with her name, the pen that waited beside it, as if for her next entry. That night, rain drummed the roof. Claire dozed uneasily, but dreams dragged her under. She stood at the cabin's desk, writing in the guest book. Her own hand scrawled words she couldn't stop. She shouldn't have come. The cabin keeps who it chooses. She woke gasping, sweat cooling on her skin. The air smelled of damp stone, not wood. The clock said 3:17 a.m., and then she heard it, the sound of a pen scratching on paper. She bolted upright. The desk sat in shadow. The guest book lay open. The pen moved. By itself. She staggered closer, heart hammering. The ink glistened fresh. Claire Hammond, October 6th. She stayed 3 nights. She did not leave. Her stomach dropped. No, no, no! The pen stilled. A knock at the door broke the silence. 3 times. Hollow. Patient. She froze. Breath caught in her throat. The knock didn't come again. When she finally dared to open the door, the porch was empty. Only rain. Only trees. But on the guest book page, a new line had appeared. The visitor has arrived. By morning, she decided to leave. Her suitcase stood ready. But when she opened the door, the forest outside had changed. The path she'd driven in on was gone. Only endless trees, wet and black, reaching forever. The car wasn't there. Not even tire tracks in the mud. Claire's voice cracked. No, I parked right here. I parked right here! The cabin whispered back. Not through walls, not through echoes, but in her own voice. I parked right here. She stumbled back inside. The guest book waited. The pages had filled overnight, everyone written in her hand. Descriptions of her panic, of her tears, of her death. She flipped faster, each entry more frantic than the last. Day 2. She begged to leave. Day 3. She screamed until her throat broke. Final night. She knew the cabin would not let her go. Claire dropped the book, tears stinging. This isn't real. This isn't... The cabin whispered in unison with her. This isn't real. The pen rolled across the desk. It stopped at the blank final page. Her hand shook, but she couldn't fight it. Something deeper than will pulled her fingers around the pen. No, she begged. But her hand moved anyway. The words scrawled across the paper in jagged strokes. The last visitor. October 6th. She wrote until the end. The lights in the cabin flared, then went dark. Weeks later, another traveler arrived. A young man, backpack slung over his shoulder, grinning at the promise of solitude. He found the key on the table. The cabin smelled faintly of pine. On the desk sat the guest book. Curious, he flipped it open. The last page caught his eye. The ink was still wet. The words blurred into shadow, but the name at the top was clear. Claire Hammond. The traveler frowned. Weird. Guess the last guest left in a hurry. He set the book down. Reached for the pen. Behind him, the door closed on its own. The cabin listened, and somewhere in the walls, faint but certain, a woman's voice whispered, "The cabin keeps who it chooses."